Thanks to the Boo fan for making this Iceberg. Big rigs over the road racing. Most of these games in the earlier tiers you'll probably recognize, but big rigs over the road racing is a bit more niche. It was a racing game made back in 2003 for PC, and actually as of writing there's news for this game. It's finally coming to Steam. You know, back then Steam was popular, but not to the same popularity it has nowadays. But out of nowhere it got a Steam listing. But the game is terrible. The physics are bad, the AI is somehow worse, and there's practically no collision anywhere, and most of the maps have major issues that the devs just didn't care to fix. Like sometimes having a stop sign in the middle of the street, and there's other weird things like you drive faster going backwards than forwards, but if you let off the pedal it just puts you at a complete stop. The only reason anyone knows about this game is purely because of how terrible it is. E.T. Atari. E.T. for the Atari is a massive mess up of a game. Such a terrible game that it even got a documentary I had to watch for my game development class in high school. Everything went wrong with making this game. The game was designed by Howard Scott Warshaw, who intended it to be an innovative adaptation of the movie, but Atari held pretty unrealistic expectations for sales based off the box office success of E.T. The game's rights were obtained in late July of 1982, giving Warsaw a little over 5 weeks to develop the game and meet the production schedule for the '82 Christmas season. The final release of this game received some pretty bad reviews. The E.T. game is often cited as one of the worst games of all time and the biggest commercial failures in the video game history. It was so bad, in fact, that it's considered a major factor of the 1983 video game crash. In fact, if you look up the crash, one of the first things you'll see off to the right is the buried cartridges of the game. Why are they buried? Well, this game was obviously bad, but quite a bit worse than some others. It was once deemed just an urban legend, but reports from 1983 stated that as a result of overproduction and returns, unsold cartridges were secretly buried in a landfill in New Mexico and covered in a layer of concrete. In 2014, when the documentary I previously mentioned was released, the people making it decided to investigate these rumors, and James Heller, the former Atari manager who was in charge of the burial, was at the excavation and admitted to the press that 728,000 cartridges of various games, not just E.T., were buried there. Only about 10% of the roughly 1,300 recovered games were E.T., so this game was so bad that it almost stopped the whole trend of games being a thing. Video games almost just stopped, and lots of its copies were buried and are still buried in New Mexico. A lot of people consider this game to be the worst video game ever made. E.T. released at a time that you couldn't just update games, but Cyberpunk was quite a bit more recent. December of 2020. Its release at the time was compared to E.T. This game had terrible glitches everywhere. The majority of people had tons of issues with this game. The game was obviously not ready for release by any means, but one of the issues that contributed to tons of the glitches is that it was released on the last generation of consoles, and it ran so bad on there that it was actually removed from the PS4 store pretty soon after launch. These older versions run better now, but at the time were nearly unplayable. But yeah, this game had tons of glitches with models not working right, bad AI, not even a glitch, but for some reason the police would just spawn in front of you instead of, you know, like out of a corner, just like breaking immersion. I mean, there was bad mesh issues. It was a completely broken game on launch, and it sucked. This game was teased back in E3 of 2013, and people had been waiting quite a long time for it. Not to mention that Keanu Reeves was one of the main characters in the game, and if you put that guy in anything, everyone will freak out, me included. But although it had an awful release, it had one of the best comeback stories ever. By June of 2021, the game had been getting lots of updates to get rid of glitches and had just been put back onto the PlayStation 4. Jumped to February of 22, and patch 1.5 was released, and everything was improved with this. It was a massive rework of the game, and glitches started disappearing left and right, and this game was on track to being what was promised on release. 2 months later in April, the Phantom Liberty DLC was teased with a 2023 release being promised, and jumped to September of that same year, the Cyberpunk Edge Runners anime was released, and this anime was amazing. I don't want to say too much about it for spoilers, but I very highly recommend it. The anime was well received. A lot of people thought it was amazing, so they decided to jump back into the game. Then the Phantom Liberty DLC comes out, starring just a slightly famous person, Idris Elba, and this DLC was amazing. Aside from the main game story being one of the best I've ever experienced in the game, this one was amazing. It had me crying at the end. And later in 2023, there was the 2.0 patch, and by the time this patch came out, it was kind of hard to remember that this game was so bad initially. Pretty much everything was fixed with the game, all the cops' AI was fixed, almost all the meshing issues were gone, and it was hard to find a glitch anywhere. This game ended up giving more than what the devs promised prior to launch, and had one of the best comeback stories out of any video game ever released. The CDI Zelda games. The CDI Zelda games are weird. The Philips CDI, or Compact Disc Interactive, was made by Philips Electronics, the company that co-invented the CD in the first place. This CDI was advertised as more than just a way to play music. It was going to be able to play games as well. So when making the Philips CDI console, they really wanted hit games from popular franchises to boost its launch popularity. And, well, Legend of Zelda was massively popular at the time, so they acquired the rights from Nintendo to make 3 Zelda games: Link: The Faces of Evil, Zelda: The Wand of Gamelon, and Zelda's Adventure. And aside from having the rights to make these Zelda games, Nintendo had no involvement in making these. These games were notably bad gameplay-wise, but the part that stood out the most were the cinematics. All cinematics done in these games were outsourced to a different company, and while the Wand of Gamelon and Faces of Evil games had janky cinematics that looked like MS Paint animations, and got turned into hundreds of memes over the years, the weirdest ones were for Zelda's Adventure, where for some reason they decided to make them live action, and, well, these didn't fit into the game at all. So the cinematics were weird for all of the games, but the main thing is that the gameplay was just atrocious. These games were terrible. They also got the rights to make a Mario game, Hotel Mario, which isn't as well known as the other Zelda games, but it's pretty terrible. It was riddled with annoying door mechanics that were most of the gameplay, unresponsive controls, weird voice acting, more full motion video cutscenes. It was just another fail of a game for the CDI. Tier 2. Bubsy 3D. Take everything bad about old survival horror games, throw it into a PS1 with graphics that look like Sonic Schoolhouse, make it a 3D platformer, and you get Bubsy 3D. Bubsy 3D is a 3D platformer that's extremely difficult and has music that makes you feel like you're gonna go insane while playing it. And for some reason, yeah, it has tank controls. The controls where you can't turn your camera unless you're standing still and slowly rotate yourself. This game is known for being terrible, but it somehow got 2 other games added to the franchise later on. Well, it was 21 years later, but they did come out. The franchise in a whole isn't awful, it's just having something like tank controls for a 3D platformer is an extremely bad idea and just ruin the game. Plumbers Don't Wear Ties. I don't even know if I can really call this one a game. Plumbers Don't Wear Ties is a game that was made for the 3DO. Yeah, I'm sure two people watching this might know what that is. The 3DO was a console made by, well, all of these companies are now shut down, but Panasonic is still around, I guess. It released in 1993, and this console completely failed. And this game didn't help it. Plumbers Don't Wear Ties is more of what would nowadays be called a visual novel than a standard game. It was about a 1 frame per 4-second slideshow story, and it was really cheesy and weird, and it was live action, so it's gonna look weird no matter what. And the game has gotten sort of a cult following over the years. It's very similar to The Room, just a very bad product, but people kind of fell in love with it because of that. It was also technically the first ever American-made visual novel game. And, well, there's news on this game.
Welcome back to Plumbers Don't Wear Ties. Now let me remaster your face.
Yeah, they released a remaster of the cult classic terrible 3DO game. This remaster had a lot of interviews with people who made the game, trashed the game. I mean, the whole story of this game is in the definitive edition, they're calling it. There's also some weird graphics differences, like remasters and whatnot. But this game was way ahead of its time, and the console it was on, I don't think you could have made a visual novel game on the 3DO and it be good at all. Now, one game that had potential, but didn't work out, was Superman 64. Like with most N64 games on this list, Superman 64 was plagued with unresponsive controls, technical flaws, repetitive gameplay, bad graphics, and even a bad story. But the worst part of this game by far, which should be the most fun, is the flying. You'd think flying around in a Superman game would be fun because, you know, you're Superman. You get to fly, that's one of the biggest things of him. But the controls are terrible, and a lot of missions you have to fly through rings that are really hard to make it through, and the whole mission resets if you miss just a couple. The game's combat was about the most redeeming part of it, but even then it wasn't anything special. The flying alone made this game awful. Sonic 06. Sonic 06 is known as one of the worst Sonic games, if not the worst Sonic game ever made. It's glitchy, takes forever to load, and the story had a lot of plot holes. When this game came out, it sort of started what people considered to be a downfall of Sonic. Just most games released after this didn't really meet people's expectations, and Sonic 06 seemed to be the catalyst of that. Nowadays, the franchise is obviously booming, with really good games coming out, a Knuckles TV show being released, and they're working on their 4th Sonic movie. But for a good while, because of this game alone, the franchise was at a really low point. But like I said, it had a bit of a redemption story, with all the movies and shows being good, so this didn't permanently affect the franchise too bad, but at the time, Sonic fans had it rough. Speaking of massive failures that turned out alright, No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky on launch was one of the most disappointing games ever released, maybe more so than Cyberpunk. So here's the original trailer for No Man's Sky, and here's what we got. Yeah, it was an awful launch. And it's not like this was just another game. A lot of people were super excited about it. I mean, I got my PS4 for this game. A brand new space exploration and survival game that literally has a universe-sized map? That sounds perfect. Who wouldn't want that? But launch was rough. It was in a terrible state. So this was a catastrophic failure initially. A lot of people were really looking forward to this game, but the developers did get a lot of money off of launch. People were so excited that they still bought it despite the pre-release reviews. So they could have done what most developers do and just stopped working on the game and left with all the money, but instead, they decided to actually finish the game. They did what Cyberpunk did, but arguably better. The game released August 9th of 2016, and 3 months later, in November, the Foundation update released. And this update added a lot to this game. There was a new creative and survival mode. You were able to build equipment on planets and buildings. Yeah, you could finally make a base that included farms, trading stations, teleporters. This update even added freighters to the game, a brand new ship type that could hold multiple other ships and act as a moving base. And this update alone was fantastic, but this is maybe 1% of what they've added. This update was DLC sized, I'd say. I mean, it was massive. Most companies wouldn't just release this for free. So imagine what it's like getting 47 more of those. Yeah, there's a lot of DLC sized updates. And literally, as I'm writing this script, a new update was announced. So almost 50 DLC sized updates in 8.5 years for free. Yeah, this game nowadays is way better than what people were expecting before launch, and by update 5 it was already way better. Nowadays the game is unrecognizable and arguably the best space game made. Pretty much once every 3 months or so, you're getting a brand new free DLC for this game. It's probably the biggest comeback in gaming, and it's still consistent. They didn't just give up after update 5. Wii and DS shovelware. There is so much shovelware for the Wii and DS, and I honestly feel bad for the kids that got a lot of this. Sure, I grew up on the Wii and DS, but my dad knew enough about games to avoid getting me something like M&M Kart Racing. Okay, maybe I missed out on that one. Anyways, yeah, there's a lot of games that were made for pretty much every movie released between 2004 and 2012, and almost none of these are good. They're just pumped out to get people's grandparents to buy it for them for their birthday, and them get super disappointed. Except Ratatouille. That's an amazing game. But there's thousands of games that were just pumped out, released off popular movies at the time, and almost none of them had any redeeming qualities. Tier 3. Aquaman. This one's very similar to the Superman game. Aquaman the game came out in 2006, launching for the GameCube. Now, I'm not the biggest Aquaman fan, but even I know that some of the underwater stuff in Atlantis can be really interesting. So it was really weird when there's nothing of importance underwater in this game. The environment was just dull and boring, the combat was messy, and although the story was kind of portrayed in a cool way with these comic panels, It wasn't a good story. This game's just another Superman type game. It had some potential, but unfortunately didn't amount to anything. Now, if you thought life couldn't get any better, I'm here to burst your bubble because Shaq Fu is a thing. Shaq Fu is a fighting game where you play as, you guessed it, Shaquille O'Neal. And, well, I'll just read off the plot of the game. Shaquille O'Neal walks into a dojo while heading to a charity basketball game in Tokyo, Japan. After speaking with Ryotsu, a martial arts master, Shaq is mistaken for a warrior chosen by the stars and goes to another dimension, the second world, where he must rescue a boy named Nezu from an evil mummy Set Ra. After defeating Set Ra and his minions, Shaq rescues Nezu and returns to his original world in time for this big game. However, he finds Beast, one of Set Ra's minions, has somehow come to the real world and is now playing for the opposing team in order to get a rematch with Shaq. So it's a 2D fighter game where Shaq gets transported to a different dimension to save a kid from a mummy. Obviously, it's not going to be the best game in the world, but from everything I've seen and how goofy of a premise it is, going into this game looking at it from a more comedic aspect is a lot better than trying to take it seriously whatsoever. It also came out on the Genesis and SNES back in 1994, which, you know, the level of quality is going to be worse because it's older, but it also makes the sequel all the more surprising. A sequel to Shaq Fu came out in 2018, where all the demons have now been disguised as celebrities, so you get to fight famous people as Shaq. The Impatient. The Impatient is a perfect example of what not to do when making a horror game. Story is obviously important in a game, but when there's hardly any scares and lots of decisions that end up not mattering, the game tends to feel like a boring movie-length horror experience rather than a good horror VR game. The game was a big disappointment because it was a prequel to Until Dawn, and the company that made it is the same company, so there was an expected level of quality in this. And yeah, it just fell through. It wasn't a very good game, and if you did want to replay it to affect who dies at the end, you have to sit through a lot of unskippable, boring dialogue where your character doesn't have any valuable input, and it's all in VR, so you're literally just standing around waiting. Balan Wonderworld. Balan Wonderworld is basically Mario Odyssey copied into something way worse. The design choices and a lot of aspects for the game are weird. Most of the abilities are just copies from Mario Odyssey, and the ones that aren't very good. Really, this game is just an attempted copy gone wrong. Even the music is extremely similar. What's most shocking is that Balan Wonderworld wasn't even like an indie game. It was made by Square Enix. It's just super odd that they put out a game like this, especially because they're pretty consistent in quality with their other games. Desert Bus. Desert Bus is a weird one. Like some of the other games on this list, it's not really a game. The first version of Desert Bus was included in the never-released Penn and Teller's Smoke and Mirrors for the Sega CD. So this game never officially came out, but people were able to get their hands on the early versions of it, and it ended up getting a lot of different adaptations in the future due to its cult following because of how bad it was. Like, there's been way too many itch.io versions of it, of course VR chat worlds, and an official VR port of the game. All the gameplay is driving the bus forward with a slight constant shift to the right, so you have to stay awake, and the goal is to make it from Tucson, Arizona to Las Vegas, Nevada in real time. You're going a constant 45 miles an hour on a 360 mile long trip, so that's 8 hours straight of driving this bus. 10k subs by the end of the year and I'll stream the whole game. Tier 4. Dragon's Lair NES. Dragon's Lair for the NES is one of, if not the worst, arcade to console port ever. The arcade version of the game was pretty cool. It was a choose-your-own-adventure game with all these different animations that looked good quality. So that's why it was really weird when the whole style of gameplay changed when it came to the NES. And aside from people not liking this type of gameplay, the frame rate was terrible, so it feels like you're playing in slow motion the whole time. You can tell by the playthrough I was watching on this game to see how it was like, the guy was having an amazing time playing it.
Game. Fuck this fucking piece of shit fucking game. That's a terrible game. That is one of the worst games I have ever played.
But yeah, the NES port of the game is terrible. But there is something new coming for this game. A Dragon's Lair movie has been in the works and in development hell for years and years, but Netflix recently picked up the rights, and now the script is just getting trimmed down and actual production may start soon. The movie's gonna be a choose-your-own-adventure type thing, like with Bandersnatch, so it makes sense Netflix is getting the rights, but the most shocking part is that when this movie started getting made, and still now, Ryan Reynolds was chosen as the lead, and he's sticking with it. So whenever this movie comes out, you're gonna see Ryan Reynolds in it. Hong Kong 97. Hong Kong 97 is a unlicensed Galaga-like game developed and published by Happysoft for the Super Famicom. It was designed by the Japanese game journalist Kowloon Kurosawa, who said the game was a satire of the video game industry. The game was made in 7 days with the help of his friend and released in Japan in 1995, being sold as floppy disks. It reportedly sold around 30 copies, only 30, and has since gained a cult following for it being considered by critics and journalists to be among the worst games ever made. Aside from it being made as a joke, I genuinely started losing my mind watching gameplay of this. Obviously the sprites were meant to be bad and that makes sense, but the music of the game is the same 5 seconds of one song on loop, constantly, with no sound effects. This game was really hard to get a hold of for quite a long time, considering the developer forgot it existed, but in 2023, due to getting tons of messages on Facebook and through email, he put the game up on his website as a free download. So this game is somehow officially being distributed through the original developer. I would not expect that at all, especially with some copyright issues like with its original cover. LJN. LJN is a company that notoriously, consistently made bad games based off of other IPs. And shockingly enough, this company themselves never actually made a game. Yeah, all of the games they got rights for, like Karate Kid, Alien, NFL, Nightmare on Elm Street, Bill and Ted, lots of them, they never themselves actually did anything with. All development was outsourced and resulted in consistently terrible video games. I don't know how they kept getting the rights to make more games, because even at the time, nobody really liked them. Sure, there was a good number of outliers, but with how many games they made, almost all of them were terrible. Tier 5. The Town with No Name. The Town with No Name is a Western point-and-click adventure game released in 1992 for the Commodore CD-TV, and this game is just crazy for the time. Nowadays, seeing a zero-budget choose-your-own-adventure game doesn't really stand out a whole lot. I mean, games are easier than ever to make now. But back in 1992, it was a lot harder to make a game, and this one was considered one of the worst ever made. Sure, it has terrible voice acting and animations that look like they came from the original version of MS Paint, probably because they are, but the game's just silly. I mean, it's like a comedy with how bad it is. So if you go into it thinking of that, it's more funny than bad. The story doesn't make sense, there's a lot of random stuff that happens. It's really just a point-and-click comedy adventure with how terrible it is. Educational games. A lot of educational games are pretty rough. For me, the worst one was iStation. Yeah, I know, I probably gave a lot of you flashbacks by saying that, but games like iStation are hard to even call games. They were purely for education, not fun at all. I mean, they were just bad. But not every educational game was bad. At least for me, I really liked the Leap Pad growing up. It's not a very popular opinion, but for me, probably because I had Star Wars games, I fell in love with it. I'd play these games where you'd have to write out different words and it'd like shoot a stormtrooper. It was dumb, but it was educational on Star Wars, so me as a kid, I fell in love with it. And then there's others that genuinely are kind of hard to call an education game, unless it has it in the title, like Minecraft Education Edition. I had to play this in one of my high school classes, and it's probably the best of these educational games. Aside from all the learning stuff you can do, the rest of it is just normal Minecraft. So while most educational games are terrible, there are a good number of outliers. The Zoo Race. The Zoo Race is a game where you play as the surviving animals of Noah's Ark after the flood ended. And to celebrate everyone surviving, a race is held. So the whole game is you racing around really low quality animal models in a really low quality map to win this race. And if you do win, you get to see Noah running forever to the winner's podium to congratulate you, and you'll see your animal dancing really awkwardly. You can see by this site to play this game, It's quite a bit old, and it was getting quite a lot of popularity in 2014 because of YouTubers like JonTron making a video on it. But yeah, this game sucks, and I kind of got hooked on it for a little bit. I downloaded this game to get some background footage and just played for an hour without realizing. There's a lot of stuff in the game that doesn't make sense, like World War II bomber planes being in this race for some reason, but the whole game is just broken, and the whole file structure, there's no folders or anything. You can just change all of the models and images if you want. It's such a terribly made game, it's almost amazing. It's kind of hard to play a race without coming across some type of issue, and I just fell in love with how terrible it was. Animal Soccer World. Animal Soccer World is a terrible game. As a game, there's only a couple of mini games you can play, like maybe 10 or 15 minutes to play all of them in the game. The rest of it is just watching a movie. That's all it is. Like most of the game, you're just watching an animated movie. And although the movie is bad, at least it is an animated movie. It's better than cutscenes in most other games. It's just bad. It's not enjoyable at all. It's a terrible game. Animal Soccer World is pretty much just a handful of different coloring sheets you could do in like a restaurant as a kid, and then you watch a really mediocre movie right after. It's not really a good experience at all. Again, thank you to the Boo fan for making this Iceberg, and thank you for watching the video. I really hope you enjoyed, and if you did, maybe like and subscribe. And this marks 1 year of making Iceberg videos, so this is a big deal for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's been an incredible journey, and I'll be posting another video probably next week talking more in depth about it. But yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, week, month, and I'll see you in the next one.